Not you, sweetheart. Go mop a bathroom.
But sir, I was told to clean here.
I don't care. Get out.
Yes, sir.
Get that filthy cart out of my doorway. Vaughn Mercer did not even look at the woman's face. The black woman wearing the gray cleaning uniform stopped and lowered her eyes. I said, "Move, are you slow?" She did not answer. She simply tightened her hands around the handle of the cart. Vaughn turned toward the crowded conference room. Does anyone here actually speak Mandarin? Anyone? Silence. He spun back toward the woman and laughed. Not you, sweetheart. Go mop a bathroom. Slowly, she raised her head. Quietly, she lifted one hand. I do, sir. The entire office froze. The smile vanished from Vaughn's face. Earlier that morning, Amara Lawson had entered through the service entrance and clocked in for her shift. Her uniform carried the sharp scent of industrial lemon cleaner. She nodded to Curtis, the overnight security guard. He smiled and greeted her by name. He was one of only 2 people in the entire building who knew it. Amara took the service elevator to the upper floor, where the partners' offices were located. The view from those windows cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. The floor was unusually busy. Conference room lights blazed behind glass walls. Catering trays stood beside the elevator. Tense voices rose from behind closed doors. Amara pushed her cart past the printer alcove. Then she stopped. 3 documents rested in the output tray. Mandarin appeared in the left column. English appeared in the right. Across the top were the words, Hangzhou Solaris Group. Amara had not intended to read them. Her eyes simply landed on the page. That was all it took. She picked up the top sheet. That is wrong, she murmured, almost to herself. She read it again. That is very wrong. The Mandarin clause used the proper legal term for force majeure. The English version translated it as an inevitable event. In a $600 million contract, those phrases carried completely different legal meanings. One meant neither party was responsible when disaster made performance impossible. The other could mean someone remained financially responsible no matter what happened. Amara placed the page back in the tray with great care. The thin green chain around her neck caught the light. A small jade pendant hung from it, carved with a single Chinese character. Then the pendant slipped beneath her uniform again. Inside the conference room, a man raised his voice. Tell them the language is non-negotiable. Send it. The printer hummed. Another page slid into the tray. The mistranslated word was already on its way to Hangzhou. Amara gripped the handle of her cart. She thought about her 7-year-old daughter, Zora, sleeping at her cousin's apartment in the Bronx. She thought about the man inside the conference room, the man who had never once bothered to look at her face. And she thought about what speaking up might cost her. She continued walking. Behind her, the dangerous mistranslation was already crossing the ocean. What do you do when you know something is broken, but no one in the room would ever believe you? Back at the conference room doorway, Amara's question still hung in the air. Mandarin or Cantonese? She had spoken in a language no one in that room had expected to hear from her. Vaughn's mocking smile remained half-formed on his face. His mouth was still open, the final insult unfinished. A junior paralegal named Delaney Cross stopped typing. Her hands hovered above the keyboard. One of the associates lowered his phone. Then the speakerphone crackled. A woman's voice came through, precise, sharp, and distinctly Beijing accented. She answered Amara in Mandarin first. Then she switched to English. Mandarin, please continue, and whoever just spoke, remain on the line. Vaughn suddenly found his voice. Ma'am, that was only a member of the cleaning staff. We have a certified translator here. Arden is our... The voice interrupted him. Your certified translator has spent this call addressing our chairman as Mr. Wei. A sharp silence followed. His name is Wei, 1 syllable. For nearly an hour, your translator has been personally insulting the chairman of our company. Put the woman with the cart on the line. No one in the room moved. Amara looked at the speakerphone. Then she looked at Vaughn. Finally, she glanced behind her, as though checking whether she was truly allowed to enter. A woman appeared from the partner's hallway. She was older, with silver hair and a perfectly tailored black suit. Celeste Whitfield, the firm's managing partner, was the granddaughter of the man whose name appeared on the building. She had heard the commotion from her office. Celeste said nothing. She simply gave Amara one small nod. Amara stepped inside the conference room. She did not sit down. She stood beside the table with her hands folded in front of her gray uniform. Then she began to speak. For the next several moments, she spoke fluently in Mandarin without hesitation. She properly introduced the firm again. She apologized for the repeated mispronunciation of the chairman's name. She used the correct tone, the sharp fourth tone, delivered with the precision and respect of a small verbal bow. She confirmed the agenda and listed the 4 matters the Chinese delegation had come to discuss. Then she carefully retranslated the disputed force majeure clause. She used the precise legal language required under Chinese contract law. Amara's voice changed when she spoke Mandarin. It became lower and more measured. Each word was given its full weight. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Arden Caldwell, the firm's certified translator, held a pen over his notes. At first, he tried to compare Amara's Mandarin with his own translation. Then he stopped checking. Soon, he placed the pen on the table. Under his breath, barely loud enough for the people beside him to hear, he whispered, "Dear God." Amara finished. The voice returned through the speakerphone. This time, it belonged to the Chinese delegation's own translator, Lin Yuan. He addressed the room in deliberate English so that no one could misunderstand him. For the official record, this woman's Mandarin is superior to that of most graduate students I have interviewed in Beijing. Her legal vocabulary is exact. Where did you find her? Vaughn's answer came out painfully small. She works here. As what? The silence that followed seemed to press against every chest in the room. Celeste finally spoke. Her gaze remained fixed on the speakerphone, but her words were directed at every person around the table. Apparently, she is the only person in this firm currently qualified to manage your account. Celeste asked the Chinese delegation for a brief pause, then ended the connection. She turned toward Amara. "What is your name?" "Amara Lawson, ma'am." "Ms. Lawson, please sit down." Amara looked at the leather chair Celeste had indicated. It was the kind of chair she had cleaned countless times. She sat. Vaughn remained standing. His tie had shifted crookedly, though he had not noticed. For the first time since Amara had begun working in that building, he was truly looking at her. The same question was already forming in every mind at the table. If she could do this, what else had they failed to see? Celeste rose. She looked around the conference room. There were numerous associates, 2 paralegals, 1 certified translator whose pen had fallen to the floor, and 1 woman in a gray uniform sitting in a partner's chair for the first time. Everyone out except Ms. Lawson and Mr. Caldwell. No one argued. Vaughn moved slowly toward the doorway. He looked back more than once. Celeste never looked at him. The door closed. The conference room became completely still. To understand how a 34-year-old janitor from the Bronx could speak better Mandarin than a man with an advanced business degree, you have to go back to Amara's childhood. She was 9 years old when her mother was hospitalized again. The state placed her with a foster grandmother named Mrs. Lin, a retired Taiwanese American schoolteacher and widow who lived alone in a 3rd-floor walk-up on Tremont Avenue. Mrs. Lin's small kitchen always smelled of star anise and steam rising from a rice cooker. She never called what she did a language lesson. She simply spoke Mandarin to Amara every day. When Amara did not understand, Mrs. Lin pointed to objects around the apartment, the teapot, the window, the cat. She said each word in Mandarin. Then she waited until Amara repeated it. That was the lesson. It continued for 8 years. On Sundays, Mrs. Lin taught her Cantonese. On Mrs. Lin's birthday, she taught Amara classical Chinese poetry. Not on Amara's birthday. On her own. A teacher's birthday, Mrs. Lin used to explain, is the day the student gives the gift. When Amara was 14, Mrs. Lin opened a wooden box and removed a small jade pendant. She fastened it around Amara's neck and spoke in Mandarin, as she always did. The character carved into the jade meant peace. So wherever you go, Mrs. Lin told her, and whatever they call you, you will carry a name they cannot take away. Mrs. Lin died when Amara was 17. Amara returned to the foster care system and eventually aged out. She enrolled at Lehman College as a linguistics major and earned a 3.87 grade point average. During her junior year, her mother was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer. Amara left college and accepted an overnight janitorial position at Whitfield and Hale because the schedule allowed her to care for her mother during the day. Her mother died less than a year later. By then, Amara was pregnant with Zora. She remained at the firm. For 6 years, Amara walked through its hallways. For 6 years, she emptied its recycling bins. For 6 years, she quietly read every discarded Mandarin document she found. And for 19 months, she watched Arden Caldwell mistranslate Chinese material repeatedly. She had never corrected him. No one had ever asked her. Inside the conference room, Celeste noticed Amara's hand drifting toward her collar. Amara touched the small jade pendant hidden beneath her uniform, the one Mrs. Lin had given her many years earlier. Peace, a name they could not take. Celeste walked to the front of the room and picked up a remote control. The wall display came to life. The Hangzhou Solaris term sheet filled the screen, 22 pages arranged in bilingual columns. Ms. Lawson, Celeste said, walk me through every meaningful difference between the English and Mandarin columns. Out loud. Begin now. Amara studied the screen. From the hallway, Vaughn watched through the doorway. He had not truly left. He stepped back into the room. Celeste, with respect, Arden has already reviewed. Celeste did not turn toward him. Vaughn, sit down. He sat. No one in that office had ordered Vaughn Mercer to sit down in years. The first fracture in his authority was small, but it was visible. Amara stood and walked toward the screen. She did not ask for permission. She began on the first page. The Mandarin phrase here means force majeure. The English version says inevitable event. Those terms are not equivalent. The correct phrase protects both parties. The English wording protects only the party that drafted it. Amara continued through the document. She identified 4 serious problems. The first was the force majeure mistranslation she had already noticed. Another clause stated that the parties would use reasonable best efforts in English. The Mandarin wording imposed something much stronger, an absolute obligation with no flexibility or exception. In a Beijing court, Amara explained, that single phrase could cost the client $80 million. Celeste's expression did not change, but her pen stopped moving. Amara then pointed out that the chairman's name had been written 3 different ways in the same document. This is not merely a spelling mistake, she said. To the Chinese delegation, it communicates disrespect 3 separate times in one paragraph. The final error appeared in the governing law clause. The English version required arbitration in Hong Kong. The Mandarin version required arbitration in mainland China. Amara turned away from the screen. If this contract had been signed, either party could have attempted to abandon the agreement immediately. The courts named in the 2 versions would not have shared jurisdiction. The transaction could have collapsed before the wire transfer cleared. No one spoke. Arden sat against the wall with his tie loosened. He cleared his throat. Celeste, she is correct about all 4 issues. I missed every one of them. Celeste turned towards him slowly. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. That will be documented. Then she faced Amara again. How long would you need to rewrite the agreement correctly? Amara considered the question. With a printer, the original documents, and a quiet room, approximately 3 hours. You have half that. Everyone held their breath. Amara did not flinch. Yes, ma'am. Celeste pointed toward an empty corner office on the south side of the floor. Use that office. Delaney Cross will bring you whatever you require. Coffee, source files, and Hangzhou's original Mandarin draft. Go. Amara left the conference room. She did not run. She did not rush. But for the first time in 6 years, she walked past the rows of desks without pushing a cleaning cart. She carried a contract instead. Amara entered the corner office and switched on the lights. Behind the desk stood another leather chair, the kind she had cleaned 1,000 times and never once occupied. She sat down. For a brief moment, she looked through the window. Manhattan glittered beneath her, dozens of floors of glass and light. She had cleaned that view countless times. She had never truly been allowed to see it. Then she opened the document and began to work. In the hallway, Vaughn spoke urgently into his phone. He was no longer attempting to save the transaction. He was attempting to save himself. Far below, a $600 million agreement was collapsing. Only a short distance away, Vaughn was already deciding who would be blamed if it failed. He pulled Marjorie Pemberton, the firm's longtime head of human resources, into a small meeting room beside the elevators. He closed the door. Marjorie, we have a problem. Celeste authorized this, Vaughn. I know what she authorized. I'm explaining why it creates a problem. He began counting on his fingers. First, liability. A non-credentialed employee is handling confidential client documents. Our insurance may not cover it. He raised another finger. Second, appearances. What will Hangzhou think when they learn we asked a janitor to rewrite their contract? Then another. Third, professional boundaries. Once we allow this, every cleaner in the building will believe they can enter a partner meeting. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. We both know how this ends. She makes a mistake, the transaction dies, and I receive the blame. Vaughn allowed the implication to settle. Celeste is becoming sentimental. You are responsible for human resources. You understand the difference. Marjorie stared at the floor. Let me think. Down the hallway, Amara continued typing. She did not know about the conversation, but the building revealed what it thought of her in countless smaller ways. Two associates walked past the open office. One deliberately spoke loudly enough for her to hear. They're letting absolutely anyone use these offices tonight. Amara did not look up. The catering manager entered. He glanced at Amara, then at the used trays. Can you clear those before you leave the floor? Thanks. She was visibly working on a partner's computer. He still saw only a cleaner. Amara nodded without stopping her work. A facilities employee appeared next. Ma'am, this office is reserved. You'll need to relocate. Amara handed him her phone. Celeste's written authorization was open on the screen. He read it twice. His expression changed. Then he left. He did not apologize. Amara kept typing. Her hands remained steady. Another person appeared in the doorway. It was Delaney Cross, the junior paralegal who had once been the only employee in the building, to thank Amara for refilling the coffee station. Delaney carried two things. One was a fresh cup of coffee, the real coffee reserved for the partner's floor. The other was a printed organizational chart for Hangzhou Solaris. She placed both items on the desk. She made no speech. You've got this, Ms. Lawson. Then she left. Amara looked at the coffee. She looked at the organizational chart. She did not cry. She had spent most of her life learning not to cry inside offices where people like her were never expected to belong. Her hand moved toward the jade pendant beneath her collar. She held it briefly. Then she returned her fingers to the keyboard and typed faster. As the deadline approached, Amara entered the conference room carrying a completed red line. 22 pages. Every revision was tracked. Marginal notes in both English and Mandarin explained the legal reason for each change. She did not announce herself. She did not knock. Amara walked to the head of the table and placed one copy before Celeste, one before Arden, and one before Vaughn. Then she sat in the same chair Celeste had previously offered her. Vaughn opened his mouth. Celeste lifted one finger. He closed it. Reconnect the call, Celeste said. The speakerphone activated. This time, the Chinese delegation's general counsel was not the only senior representative listening. Chairman Wei Jinhong himself had joined the meeting. His translator, Lin Yuan, sat beside him. The revised contract appeared on the shared display. Amara began. She guided the Hangzhou delegation through the complete red line in Mandarin, clause by clause, revision by revision. She explained the reason for every change. She answered every question without hesitation. Then Chairman Wei asked her something additional. No one else in the New York conference room understood the question because he used the older, formal Mandarin associated with his generation. He read a line from the contract's preamble, written in a classical style. Ms. Lawson, do you recognize this line? Amara did. She recited the following line from memory. It came from a Tang dynasty poem, the kind Chairman Wei's grandfather had once repeated at the dinner table. A long pause followed. Then Chairman Wei laughed. It was brief and surprised, the laugh of a man who had just encountered something unexpectedly wonderful. Lin Yuan switched to English. I am formally entering into the record that Ms. Amara Lawson is the most capable Mandarin-speaking counterpart Whitfield and Hale has ever presented to our company. We request her participation in every future discussion. Chairman Wei added in careful English, and we would like to complete the agreement. The room released a collective breath. Vaughn exhaled involuntarily, like a man who had kept his lungs closed for far too long. Then, by instinct, he attempted to reclaim the moment. Wonderful. Chairman Wei, I will have my team finalize the documentation and... Celeste lifted her finger again without looking toward him. Vaughn stopped. The finalized transaction was worth $620 million. The firm's fee upon closing would be just under $9 million. Only hours earlier, Amara Lawson had earned $21.40 per hour cleaning the same conference room in which she now sat. Celeste ended the call and faced her. Ms. Lawson, we need to have a serious conversation, but not tonight. She paused. Go home, hug your daughter, rest. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Amara nodded. She rose and left the conference room. She walked past the rows of desks and the printer where she had first noticed a single mistranslated word. Then she retrieved the cleaning cart from where she had abandoned it. Her shift was not over. She was still being paid as a janitor. So Amara finished vacuuming the partner's floor. She cleaned the corner office where she had rewritten the contract. She cleaned the conference room where the chairman of a multi-billion-dollar Chinese conglomerate had just requested her by name. Then she clocked out and took the train home. The following morning, Amara entered Celeste Whitfield's corner office. The city beyond the windows looked gray and clean, and the river rested beneath the morning light. Amara wore the only blazer she owned. It was black and slightly too large across the shoulders. She had borrowed it from a cousin for a funeral years earlier. Celeste noticed. She did not comment. A manila folder lay open on the desk. It contained Amara's human resources file, the file that had been stored in the firm's system throughout her 6 years of employment. No one had ever opened it. Celeste turned it around. Linguistics major at Lehman College, a 3.87 grade point average before withdrawal. She continued reading. A recommendation letter from Professor Malcolm Rhodes describing you, and I am quoting him directly, as the most naturally gifted language student he taught in 26 years. Celeste closed the folder. This information has been in our possession for 6 years. Not one person at this firm opened the file. She paused. That is our failure, Ms. Lawson. It is not yours. Amara did not respond. She simply listened. Celeste slid one page across the desk. This is an employment offer. Amara looked down. Senior Cross-Cultural Counsel for the Asia-Pacific Desk. Base salary, $185,000. Full benefits. Tuition reimbursement so you can complete your law degree through Fordham's evening program. Effective immediately. Amara did not pick up the paper. Not yet. She had spent most of her life teaching herself not to cry in rooms like this. She did not cry now. But one hand moved briefly toward the jade pendant beneath her collar before returning to her lap. Ms. Whitfield, I will accept. Celeste nodded. But I want one condition in writing first, Amara continued. Celeste set down her pen. Name it. Amara's voice neither rose nor trembled. Every resume submitted by a member of the cleaning staff must be opened and reviewed by an actual person within 30 days. She paused. I do not want to become the exception. I want to be the reason there are no more exceptions. Celeste remained silent for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen. Done. She wrote the condition directly into the offer letter beneath the salary provision. Then she called Marjorie Pemberton into the office to serve as a witness. Marjorie entered and examined the document. She looked at Amara. Then she slowly reread the offer and signed the witness line. Whatever Marjorie had considered doing the previous evening, she did not do it now. Celeste folded her hands. There is one more thing, Ms. Lawson. Her eyes moved toward the green chain at Amara's collar. May I ask what the character means? Amara touched the pendant. It means peace. A woman gave it to me when I was 14. She told me to carry a name that no one could take away. Celeste's expression softened. She was right. Amara almost smiled. Not quite. Celeste stood and extended her hand across the desk. Welcome to the firm, Ms. Lawson. Amara shook it. Celeste then slid another page across the desk. One final matter. It was a travel itinerary. Hangzhou Solaris had personally requested Amara's presence at the closing dinner in China. Coach will be acceptable, I assume? Celeste asked. For the first time since entering the firm, Amara smiled. It was small but genuine. First class would be acceptable too, ma'am. That evening, Amara returned to her apartment in Mott Haven. The apartment occupied the upper floor of a walk-up on Cypress Avenue. It had one bedroom, a kitchen opening directly into the living room, and a window facing the rear wall of another building. Amara stood at the counter, preparing instant chicken-flavored noodles in a paper cup. Zora sat on a stool beside her, working through a list of spelling words. The pencil looked too large in her small hand. The refrigerator buzzed. The radiator clicked. A sticky note in Amara's handwriting remained attached to the cabinet. Groceries. Amara had not told Zora about the new job. She did not know how. She had spent her life avoiding promises she could not guarantee. Zora looked up from her homework. Mama, what is a salary? Amara paused with the spoon halfway toward the cup. Where did you hear that word? At school. Mrs. Donnelly said her husband has one. Amara smiled and set down the spoon. A salary means someone pays you the same amount regularly, no matter how many hours you work that week. Zora considered this. Do you have one? Amara looked at her daughter. At the pencil, at the spelling words, at the tiny kitchen around them. Starting next week, yes, baby? I do. Zora nodded as though carefully storing the information. Then she returned to her homework. Cool. Can we buy the cereal with the marshmallows now? Amara laughed. It was the first full, genuine laugh she had allowed herself in a very long time. "Yes, Zora, we can buy the cereal with the marshmallows." The phone rang. Amara answered. It was Delaney Cross. The junior paralegal was calling from her own apartment, outside office hours. "Ms. Lawson, I just heard the news. I'm so happy I cannot sleep." That was all she said. Then she wished Amara good night and ended the call. Amara held the phone for a moment longer than necessary. After dinner, she sat beside Zora on the couch. Amara reached behind her neck and unclasped the jade pendant Mrs. Lin had given her so many years earlier. She had worn it through every shift and every day of her adult life. She held the pendant in her palm and studied it. Then she turned toward her daughter. "Zora, a woman named Mrs. Lin gave this to me when I was a little older than you." Zora stared curiously at the jade. "I think it should stay around your neck for a while." Amara lifted it carefully. "The character means peace. It means no one can take your name away from you." Zora became quiet and serious in the way only a 7-year-old can. "Even at school." Amara's voice cracked slightly on a single word. "Especially at school." She fastened the pendant around Zora's neck. The chain was too long and fell toward the middle of her chest. Zora touched the jade, looked down at it, then raised her eyes toward her mother. "Okay, Mama." That was all she said. She fell asleep on the couch with the pendant held inside her small fist. Her spelling homework remained unfinished on the kitchen counter. Amara pulled a blanket beneath her daughter's chin. Then she sat in the darkness with one hand resting gently on Zora's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breathing. Amara did not cry. She had spent too many years learning not to. Soon she would enter a closing dinner in Hangzhou wearing a different blazer. She would shake hands with men whose names appeared on buildings. She would speak Mandarin to a chairman whose grandfather had once been a translator. But the woman sitting in that dark Bronx living room, with her hand on her daughter's back, was already capable of all those things. She always had been. Later, at the Amanfayun Resort in Hangzhou, a private banquet took place inside a restored tea village courtyard. Stone walls surrounded wooden beams and hanging lanterns. 22 people sat at one long table. Chairman Wei Jinhong occupied the head. His executive board sat along one side. Government observers from the Provincial Commerce Bureau sat near the far end in dark suits. The company's general counsel, Fang Lihua, was present, along with Lin Yuan, the translator. Across from them sat Celeste Whitfield, Delaney Cross, Vaughn Mercer, and Amara Lawson. Vaughn remained on the transaction team, but barely. An emergency internal review had placed him on probation. He still held his title for the moment. He sat several seats away from Amara and had not spoken to her since the incident in New York. Amara wore a dark green silk blazer. She had purchased it from a second-hand store in Manhattan and taken it to a neighborhood tailor for alterations. The jade pendant was no longer around her neck. It remained thousands of miles away on her daughter's chest in a small Bronx bedroom. In its place, Amara wore a small enamel pin bearing a Chinese character. Mrs. Lin's daughter had mailed it after seeing the firm's announcement in the news. The character meant teacher. Before dinner began, Chairman Wei stood. He spoke first in Mandarin and then repeated himself in English. "Tonight, we are not only signing one agreement." He paused until everyone understood. Hangzhou Solaris is also selecting its exclusive Asia-Pacific legal partner for a 5-year engagement worth $240 million. He gestured toward the far end of the table. "I have invited 2 competing firms to join us. They are also seated here." The senior partners representing the competing firms smiled politely. One adjusted his cuff. "Whitfield and Hale will either earn this partnership tonight or lose it." Celeste did not move. Vaughn's face became slightly green. Amara lifted her teacup. She took a small sip, set it down, and folded her hands in her lap. Dinner began. Later, Fang Lihua slid a single sheet of paper across the table until it stopped beside Amara's plate. "Ms. Lawson, we have a small test." The conversation ended. "Translate this aloud into English for everyone at the table. No dictionary." Amara picked up the page. It contained a passage from classical Chinese legal writing, a section of Ming Dynasty commercial law. It was the kind of language that almost no modern attorney would be expected to translate without preparation. Amara had not studied material like it since Mrs. Lin read classical poetry to her at the kitchen table. The senior partners from the competing firms visibly relaxed. One leaned backward, already preparing a polite expression of sympathy for her inevitable failure. Vaughn looked toward Amara. For the first time, there was no contempt in his expression. There was concern. Concern for her rather than himself. His probation had changed something small inside him. It did not redeem him, but the change was there. Amara read the passage silently once. Then she placed the page carefully on the white tablecloth, just as she had placed the mistranslated document back into the printer tray in New York. She did not look at it again. She raised her eyes toward Chairman Wei, Feng Lihua, and the rest of the table. Then she began translating. For several uninterrupted minutes, no one moved. A waiter stopped in the middle of pouring wine, the bottle still tilted above a glass. Celeste placed her chopsticks on the table. The competing partners stopped smiling. Amara did not merely translate the words. She preserved the rhythm, cadence, dignity, and formal authority of the centuries-old text. Her English sounded as though it had been written by a Supreme Court justice from another era. When the original used an ancient idiom concerning merchants and mountains, Amara rendered it. A merchant who conceals his measure cannot be trusted with the road that carries him. Lin Yuan's eyes briefly filled with emotion. He lowered his gaze toward his plate. Amara finished. Then she looked directly at Chairman Wei and switched to Mandarin. Chairman, forgive my directness. This passage was not merely a test. She paused. It was also an invitation. She held his gaze. I accept. The banquet hall seemed to stop breathing. Chairman Wei rose. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he walked the full length of the table. He passed his board members, the government observers, Celeste, and Vaughn. He stopped behind Amara's chair. Then he addressed the entire room, first in Mandarin and then in careful English. My grandfather was a translator. He paused. He worked for the British in Shanghai during the early 20th century. Chairman Wei continued slowly. Before he died, he told me the hardest part of his profession was not learning the words. Another pause. It was being recognized as the person who knew them. He looked toward Amara. My grandfather lived for more than 70 years. His employer never addressed him as Mr. Wei. They called him only boy. Silence spread through the room. I came to this table intending to sign one agreement. He drew a breath. I will sign too. Both will be signed with the firm that placed Ms. Lawson in this chair. Chairman Wei continued. And I will place her name first on the signature page, above mine and above Ms. Whitfield's. He allowed the statement to settle. In my country, the translator is the bridge. His eyes remained on Amara. And tonight, this woman is the bridge. Then Chairman Wei Zhenhong, the elderly chairman of a $4 billion conglomerate, bowed deeply from the waist. It was a complete and formal bow, carrying the respect of a son standing before his father's grave. Lin Yuan quietly explained the significance to the two competing partners. A Chinese chairman had bowed to a translator at his own table, in his own country. Their expressions changed. Amara stood and returned the bow, slightly less deeply, as cultural protocol required. She said nothing. Celeste turned her head slightly toward Vaughn. Her voice was barely audible. Vaughn, stand. You will applaud her, and you will mean it. Vaughn rose. He brought his hands together. Once, twice, again. Then the entire banquet hall joined him. As Chairman Wei returned to his seat, he paused beside Amara. Ms. Lawson, after dinner, my chief of staff will give you something. He smiled faintly. It comes from my mother. She watched the conference call from New York and insisted that you receive it. After dinner, Chairman Wei's chief of staff approached Amara with a small black lacquer box decorated with gold trim. He placed it carefully in her hands. It is from the chairman's mother, Wei Ying. She watched the conference call from her apartment in Hangzhou. Amara opened the box. Inside rested a small jade pendant carved with one Chinese character. Teacher. The chief of staff lowered his voice so that only Amara could hear. It was carved during the Ming Dynasty by an artisan from her family's home village. It has remained in their family for 400 years. He paused. She said it was time for it to leave the family. Inside the box was also a folded note handwritten in Mandarin. Amara read it. To the woman who was made invisible so she could see everything. From one teacher to another. Wei Ying. Amara held the pendant in her palm for a long moment. She thought of another jade pendant. Another character. Another woman who had offered a piece of herself to a child no one else had noticed. One pendant had come from a Bronx kitchen. The other had come from a village in Hangzhou and had survived for centuries. Both were jade. Both were gifts from women who had spent much of their lives being overlooked. Both were given for the same reason. To break the chain. Back in New York, the firm released an internal memorandum. The news quickly reached the media. Before long, a major business newspaper published a feature under the headline, "From Janitor to Senior Counsel, How Whitfield and Hale Found Its Most Important Lawyer Inside Its Own Building." The article included hard numbers. $860 million in confirmed new business had been attributed to Amara during her first months in the new role. 2 additional Asia-Pacific clients had joined the firm at her personal request. Both had previously refused to work with several other elite firms. They signed only after learning that Amara Lawson represented Whitfield and Hale. Under the condition Amara had added to her employment offer, the firm reviewed the resumes of other janitorial employees. Several possessed advanced degrees from foreign universities. One night shift cleaner from Honduras, Rafael Vargas, had worked as a corporate accountant in Tegucigalpa for 19 years before immigrating to the United States. He became a junior associate in the firm's Latin America practice. For the first time since arriving in the country, he earned enough from one job to support himself without taking a second position. Other major Manhattan law firms soon introduced similar resume review requirements. The press began calling the policy the Amara Clause. The American Bar Association invited Amara to address its annual convention. Celeste commissioned a portrait for the firm's main lobby. It was not a portrait of herself. It was not a portrait of her grandfather, the founder. It was a portrait of Amara. The painting hung beside the portraits of the founding partners. The plaque beneath it was written in English and Mandarin. Amara Lawson Senior Cross-Cultural Counsel, the room was always hers. The story spread widely after Delaney, with Amara's permission, posted a brief video online. It contained only 2 things. The first was the audio of Chairman Wei's speech at the Hangzhou closing dinner. The second was a still photograph of Amara's old cleaning cart parked against the wall of the partners' hallway. Millions of people viewed it. The phrase "she works here" began circulating across social media. At the American Bar Association convention in Chicago, more than 1,000 attorneys filled a hotel ballroom. Amara approached the podium wearing a navy suit. It was her own suit. Purchased, not borrowed. She used no notes. Near the conclusion of her speech, she said, "For 6 years, I cleaned the floor of the room where I now sit." The ballroom became silent. I want to say something to everyone listening tonight, to the overnight workers, to the people pushing carts, to the young employees in the mailroom, to every person whose name has never been learned by the people signing their paycheck. Amara raised her eyes from the podium. "You are not invisible." She paused. "You are unread." She allowed the distinction to settle over the room. Invisible means there is nothing there. Unread means the page exists, but someone has chosen not to open it. She drew a breath. "So, for the rest of my career, my responsibility is to open pages." Amara looked across the ballroom. "And for the rest of yours, do not let anyone close your page quietly. Make a sound. The right room is listening more often than you believe." She stepped away from the microphone. The applause did not begin politely. It rose in waves. Some people stood immediately. Others took longer. Soon, everyone in the ballroom was on their feet. Celeste stood in the 3rd row, applauding. At the back of the room, Vaughn Mercer was also standing. He had been demoted to a junior position. The internal investigation found that he had been responsible for mistranslations involving 2 other Asian clients for more than a year. Those errors had cost the firm an estimated $40 million in lost or undervalued business. He kept his job because Celeste had privately asked Amara whether he should be terminated. Amara had answered, "Demote him, do not fire him. Send him to the language program he should have completed years ago. Make him learn from a teacher he does not believe he deserves." That is the lesson. Firing is removal. Teaching is repair. Vaughn spent months in an immersive Mandarin program in Taipei. He submitted written reports to Amara in Mandarin every week. He was not redeemed. The story did not pretend otherwise. But the man standing at the back of that ballroom was no longer exactly the same man who had mocked a woman in a gray uniform. He was applauding. For the first time in his life, Vaughn understood that he was the one who had entered the wrong room. Celeste gave only one interview about the entire experience. During a podcast, the host asked what the firm had done correctly. Celeste remained silent for a long moment. Then she answered, "We did not do anything right. We did one thing less wrong than usual. We opened a file that should have been opened 6 years earlier." She paused. "The lesson is not that we discovered Amara. The lesson is that there are people like Amara in every building in this country, and almost no one is looking for them. If you operate a company and can hear my voice, open the files. All of them. The effects continued spreading. Rafael Vargas eventually secured his first independent client, a major acquisition for a logistics company based in Mexico City. The client specifically requested him by name. Zora transferred from her Bronx public school to a Mandarin immersion charter school in Manhattan. Her tuition was supported by a scholarship fund Amara established in Mrs. Lin's name. 12 students received scholarships during the program's first cycle. Whitfield and Hale rebuilt its entire human resources system. The complete resume of every hourly employee was now reviewed by a partner shortly after hiring. The software change cost $18,000. During the first year, it contributed to 9 new client accounts, 4 internal promotions, and no qualified employees remaining forgotten in a digital file. A year later, Amara still lived in the Bronx. She had moved only a few blocks away, into a 2-bedroom apartment on an upper floor. The kitchen window faced east. Morning sunlight entered in long, gentle rectangles. Amara stood at the stove making pancakes. Zora, now 8, entered the kitchen in her pajamas and climbed onto a stool. Around her neck, suspended from a thin green chain, hung the jade pendant Mrs. Lin had once given Amara. The character meant peace. Zora opened a Mandarin children's book and began reading aloud. She mispronounced atone. Amara did not look away from the pancakes. "Try it again, baby." Zora repeated the word. This time, she said it correctly. They smiled at each other. The doorbell rang. It was Delaney Cross, now a full associate at Whitfield and Hale, on her way to a weekend client meeting. She handed Amara a small wrapped package and left. Amara opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside was a framed photograph from the closing dinner in Hangzhou. The image captured the precise moment Chairman Wei bowed. Amara stood across the table. Celeste watched from the side. Near the edge of the photograph, almost out of focus, Vaughn had been captured rising to applaud. Amara hung the photograph above the spice rack, where she would see it every morning. Now, consider what this story means to you. Perhaps you have been the most capable person in a room where no one bothered to look at you. Perhaps you watched someone else being dismissed and remained silent. Perhaps you recognize something of Vaughn in yourself and do not yet know what to do with that realization. There are 3 small things you can do. None of them costs anything. First, learn the name of one person you usually pass without acknowledging. The doorman, the barista, the cleaner. Learn one name and say it aloud. Every story like Amara's begins when someone finally speaks another person's name. Second, think of someone in your own life who has been underestimated. A coworker, a relative, a neighbor, someone whose page no one has opened. Send that person a message. It does not need to be long. Tell them you see them. Tell them what you see. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for that message. Be the person who sends it. Third, leave the name of someone who deserves to be seen. One word, one name. That is enough. Every name represents a person someone finally chose to notice. If this story meant something to you, press the like button, share it with one person, and subscribe for more stories like this. The world is filled with people like Amara. How many brilliant people do we pass every day without ever knowing who they truly are? No one is invisible. They are simply unread. Open the page. Learn one name. That is where everything begins. How many brilliant people do we pass every day without ever knowing who they truly are? No one is invisible. They are simply unread. Open the page. Learn one name. That is where everything begins.